Okay, so recently there's been a little bit of a situation going on with a Japanese VTuber agency named Limitless, and they've been in the news recently for something very interesting that doesn't really happen too often, and it's involving the termination of two of their VTubers, right? And again, you might be wondering, well, what's going on with this? They've only got 5K followers, they're not that big, what can really be interesting about this? Well, essentially, it's come out that two of their VTubers, VTubers Kanade Ruka and Baku Baku, got terminated from their VTuber agency due to violating their no relationships allowed company rule. Kanade Ruka has added their own statement. So here we go. This is from them saying, "Over the years, I've been deeply grateful for all your support and kindness. I extend my heartfelt gratitude for the opportunity to meet and connect with you all. I also recognize that there has been shortcomings in my efforts or instances that caused you concern through my activities. I sincerely apologize for any such moments. With this, I've decided to conclude these activities now. Thank you truly for everything up until now." So they don't really kind of respond to the relationship thing there. And obviously they say here, "Just one thing, please allow me to clarify to avoid any misunderstanding. Regarding this matter, it is entirely my own shortcomings and the responsibilities lie with me. There is no there is no fault on the part of Romarisu-sama. On the contrary, you supported me with the utmost courtesy throughout, including handling the other party to the very end. I have nothing but gratitude towards the agency. That said, as per the agency rules, romantic relationships within the agency are prohibited, so I'd appreciate your understanding on that front as well. I kindly ask you for your favorable consideration." So yeah, it seems like they were terminated for being in a relationship together within the company, right? Obviously, it seems like there was just a no relationships allowed in the company rule, not necessarily no relationships allowed at all. So you're allowed to have relationships, but you can't, have relationships between different talent, which, to be honest, I think is understandable, right? I think it's kind of understandable to some sense, right? I think that, obviously terminating them maybe a little bit crazy. Maybe they could have talked about it or whatever, and maybe come up with a solution instead of terminating. But to be honest, I can understand how that could make things a little bit harder in terms of, the company running and, internal kind of, politics, right? Because if you think, right, if they were to break up, let's say in a couple months' time, then it's going to be slightly awkward, right? Whenever they try to interact with each other or they go to the same events and things like that, because they're always going to be crossing paths and it's going to be extremely awkward and bring the mood down quite a bit, with a lot of the other VTubers and all this kind of stuff. So again, I can understand why there is a similar rule for that, but I also, do think maybe termination was a bit too far. People saying within the company said, "Yes, sorry if that wasn't clear." I said, there's no reason she should be apologizing for something like this. In fact, it's far more controlling and frankly indefensible for a company to dictate what one can do in their private life, which, yeah, I can also understand that front as well, right? I say you work for the company, you're not owned by the company, you are not their slave. What you do in your off hours is your business and not theirs. If we assume that what was happening was not illegal, it created a conflict in the workspace, i.e. dating your management and causing conflicts of interest because of it, then there should never be an issue. And obviously they say, yeah, if this was a relationship within the company, then okay, maybe not an issue, but no racial relationships allowed in general, that's the thing I take issue with. And yeah, if it was no relationships in general, I think there's an issue with that, right? I think that people should be allowed to do whatever they want. And if they want a relationship outside of it, that's totally fine. But I think it is more so, don't try dating your upper management or your coworkers. It works like that, which I think is, I think that's fair enough to have some kind of, ruling bus, inside of that, because we all know, I don't know if you guys have ever worked at a place where sometimes, there'll be two people that are dating and then they fall out or whatever. And then it just gets very awkward, right? It's not a very good work environment for everybody else that has to deal with everything that is going on, right? So, banning it outright will obviously stop this from happening, at least mostly. Of course, sometimes it still will happen, for example, in this case, but, it kind of will, kind of push people to look elsewhere to find love, right? Sure, if maybe what you wanted to do is, I guess, get terminated or whatever after doing that, and you're fully on board with being terminated after doing that, then maybe that's fine. But again, I think it's one of those cases where it is kind of protecting the company kind of internal politics, right? They're saying, no romantic relationships within the company is a pretty common thing, and it's gone back and forth throughout the years if it's acceptable or not. On the one hand, many romantic relationships happened with co-workers, and sometimes it's the best relationship ever. But the others can lead to favoritism within the company, which is also true. You know, it's not even necessarily about fallout, but favoritism. And also, if they had a fight, it could disrupt the company space. But if a company has a policy to have no romantic relationships within the company and they catch you, this is pretty much the result. As a VTuber agency has rules, VTuber breaks the rules and gets fired. Wow. Retarded VTuber fans. Wow. This company is so controlling. I hope they go bankrupt and die. Bad corpo. Cringe, based. Which obviously, yeah, say interesting that it's only within the company that is banned, which is a lot more reasonable than a complete ban, and has absolutely nothing to do with maintaining the illusion for the audience or whatever, which, yeah, I do think is, true, right? I think it is one of these things where, I know a lot of people will probably get mad over this, right? A lot of people will be pretty outraged, but I think at the same time, it is also the case of, yeah, as I said, protecting the company and, how they do things, right? So again, I don't really have a problem with it personally. And there's also another post from Anime Trends here as well, saying a VTuber agency has just ruined the careers of two of their talents for committing the worst crime in the idol industry, falling in love in the office. The Japanese agency Limitless abruptly expelled two of its talents by issuing a cold statement that publicly exposes them for having a romantic relationship and putting fan trust at risk. Apparently, for these companies, it's easier to destroy two entire careers and seize their accounts than to accept that behind the colorful anime avatars are real human beings with feelings. Now, of course, I think this kind of, post here maybe takes it a little bit differently. I think this one obviously is more talking about, the fan kind of reactions and stuff like that, which I do think is true. If this was kind of terminated due to the fact of what the fans would think and, having, kind of removing that parasocial element, whatever you want to call it, then I do think that is a little bit of a problem, right? But I think that if it is a company policy just to not date within the other workers and whatever, to avoid the issues that could come with that, I think that's fine, right? I don't know. I don't think it is like, this kind of horrible thing that maybe they're trying to make it out to be. Now, sure, maybe they could have had a less harsh punishment than terminating them. Sure, I do think that maybe could have been the case. They probably could have worked it out a little bit, but again, maybe they just wanted to show off a strong kind of resolve and a strong punishment for those that do break that rule, I guess, right? And again, I am a little bit confused as well how they just didn't keep this a secret, right? I feel like it would be pretty easy to keep this a secret and not tell anybody at the company, hey guys, I'm dating this person in the company. Like maybe just like do it in your own time and yeah. But again, maybe they can't keep secrets. Maybe they're being watched all the time. I don't know. People saying, I didn't know the VTubers are governed by the same idol love ban rule. And again, I don't think it is. I think maybe this has been taken out of, out of proportion here. I feel like, the actual reason is due to like in-company policies, right? Like in-company dating, which again, I think is a little bit weird. At its core, VTuber is essentially idol. And again, I don't know if anybody's corrected them on that in the sense that I feel like, from what I've got from this, it's a no relationship rule within the company. But if it is a relationship rule, around the what am I even trying to say? If it's a company rule for like anybody, like you can't date anybody, then I do think that is a problem, right? I do think that obviously is pretty terrible to be terminated for that reason. But as I said, if it's a within company rule, that's understandable, right? That is understandable. Say, do people really think that all famous VTubers from Hololive agencies and any Japanese agency are people with no social life, bro? They're already adults. You don't have to be super naive and think most of them don't have their partners behind their own lives, behind the anime drawing, which yeah, it's obviously true. I still don't understand why they don't go indie. I get the companies gaslight them into thinking they're nothing without the company, but it's literally a lie, which again, sometimes, companies can help out, right? I can understand the benefits of a company. Now, I do think that sometimes, indie VTubers, are starting to be much more attractive to people and because again, it seems like you can make just the same amount of money and get the same amount of exposure as an indie VTuber. But I also think at the same time, right, sometimes agencies can help out in terms of if you want to do something on a bigger stage, right? If you want to do concerts and things, usually it is better to be with an agency to do that than to do it as an indie. Else you will have to be a pretty big VTuber as an indie to actually, you know, be able to do that and get the money to be able to do that, right? So usually an agency will allow you to do those kind of more idle activities, which some people are looking for, and that's why people go with them, right? As well as many other things as well. They get protection, you know, for example, you know, a lot of them have like legal teams or whatever that will protect them from all of the weird stuff that goes on, as we've seen throughout my videos. So again, I can understand why people do kind of do that, right? Who said, I want you to remember that the case of Uruhai Rushia, while she was a saint and it was actually proven she was pretty crazy, when one of the messages from a certain artist leaked in a Discord, what was the attitude of her fans? Said, I don't understand why VTuber agencies, when one of the talents is living a romantic interest, take it badly. I mean, they also have the right to live a romantic interest in their lives, have to respect the decision, which I do think is true, right? People say it's an issue of merits and being risks to belonging to a company. Company impose restrictions in exchange for supporting activities, and the contract requires you to comply with them, all for the sake of the company's image or operational policies. Which I guess is true, right? It's the whole, like, it's just business statement, right? Saying just how it is over there. Fans tend to get attached to a character romantically, and again, yeah, it honestly fully depends on exactly what this ruling is and whether it is within company dating or not company dating. Just to kind of summarize it up here, if it is within company dating, I don't find there is a problem with this. I feel like VTubers, you know, dating within the company or within, you know, with managers and whatever within the company would be a problem to the company itself, and how things are run, whether there's bias, whether there's kind of, you know, conflict or anything like that, that could obviously hinder the productivity and efficiency of the company. So 100% understand that. Now, if it's relationships outside of the company and they're dating just someone random and they're not allowed to do that, then again, that would be an issue, right? That would be an issue because they should be allowed to live their own lives. They should be allowed to do whatever they want, but apparently they can't, right? But again, I think it is a pretty interesting situation. So yeah, if you guys did enjoy this video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. Also, go to GameStop, use my code Kazo, get 10% off. Again, they've got a ton of really cool stuff over there. Definitely recommend checking it out. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one. That's all. See ya.